This film is a part of my PhD thesis. One of the aims of the thesis is to examine how different conservation methods preserve and affect fragile silk costumes. In a study described in the article Evaluation of Stitched Support Methods for the Remedial Conservation of Historic Silk Costumes, 3 stitching methods commonly used in costume conservation are examined. Among other factors, the increase in the fabric strength resulting from the different methods is investigated. The investigated methods used are support fabric with laid couching, support fabric with brick couching, Crepeline attached with running stitches. As the study couldn't be made on authentic material, a substitute was produced. Both the Royal Armoury and the Halville Museum have many costumes in fragile silk. Silk is a difficult fabric to conserve. It was therefore natural to limit the test material to silk. To achieve a representative test material, a standard silk fabric was artificially aged with thermo-oxidation to give the fabric properties similar to 17th century silk. By using a standard fabric, you get a material with an even quality. Another advantage is that the experiments can be repeated with exactly the same material. Abrasion and tear are a common source of damage on silk costumes, and therefore the conservation methods' effect on these 2 types of damage were examined. To create a damaged abraded surface, an apparatus usually used to investigate how a fabric stands up to abrasion was used. In this case, an apparatus named Martindale was used to abrade the surrogates up to a level found reasonable. The resulting abraded area is 80 mm squared in dimension. A tear was simulated by cutting a 50 mm long horizontal slit with a scalpel. A description of how the conservation methods are executed follows. This is how the surrogates have been secured with a support fabric and laid couching. As costumes are often lined, a lining is stitched to the surrogate to make the process more authentic whilst measuring time to complete the treatment. It is more complicated and more difficult to handle and to restrict stitching into only the top layer when there are 2 layers of fabric. A support fabric in the same material as the surrogate is cut to a size bigger than the abraded area. The abraded area is 80 mm and the support is cut 95 by 95 mm. It is important that the conservation material matches the material to be supported. The support fabric is inserted through the hole in the surrogate, positioned with threads aligned and an even overlap, then pinned into place. At the start and end of the stitching, the thread is locked and anchored with some extra stitches. The support fabric is stitched at its edges with running stitches, through the upper layer but not through the lining. The stitches on the face side are 1 mm long and on the reverse 5 mm. All stitches are made using fine hair silk and a thin needle number 15 is used for the stitching. Now the damaged and abraded surface is secured. The frayed silk is secured to the support fabric with laid couching. The laid couching is begun where the fabric is whole and the stitch laid over the damaged surface into where the surrogate is undamaged again. A long stitch is laid in the warp direction over the weft and is then sewn down with short stitches, about 1 mm in length, perpendicular to the long stitch. The stitches are only made through the damaged fabric and the support, but not into the lining. This is a surrogate after conservation with laid couching. About 11 rows of stitches with 6 to 8 mm spacing cover the conserved area. It takes 68 minutes on average to conserve a surrogate like this. This is how the surrogates have been secured with a support fabric and brick couching. The surrogate to be secured with brick couching has up to now been treated in the same way as the surrogate treated with laid couching. It is given a lining and the support fabric is inserted under the damage and attached by stitching. Now the damaged and abraded area is going to be secured. In this case, it is done using brick couching stitch. The brick couching is made with short 1 to 2 mm long running stitches in the warp direction, over the weft, through the damaged fabric and the support fabric, but not into the lining. On the reverse, the stitches are 3 to 5 mm long. The conservation stitching covers not only the damaged area, but overlaps into the undamaged fabric. This is a surrogate with brick couching when it is finished. About 11 rows of stitches, with about 5 mm spacing, cover the conserved area. On average, it took 40 minutes to conserve a surrogate like this. The surrogates conserved with Crepeline look like this. Crepeline, a light silk organdy fabric which is used to cover a fragile damaged area. The Crepeline will be fitted to the area to be covered. Most commonly, when Crepeline is used to conserve costumes, the Crepeline is allowed to follow the natural lines on the costume, such as seams, edges or patterns, so that the edge of the Crepeline is less obvious. In this case, it is a surrogate that will be conserved, which doesn't have these requirements. Instead, the sample's damaged area will be covered by a square piece of Crepeline. We don't have a support fabric under the damaged surface, but there is a lining. The Crepeline is cut on the grain. This is made easier by pulling out 1 or 2 threads and then cutting along the line that results. The Crepeline shall cover the damaged area with an overlap. A template in heat-resistant plastic is adapted to the shape and size which the Crepeline should have, and the edges of the fabric are folded and ironed over the template to get sharp, straight edges and corners. Then some threads are removed from the turned under, unfinished edges to reduce the distracting visual effect of the double layer of fabric. Now the Crepeline is ready. It is placed evenly and with threads aligned over the damaged area and pinned into place. Next, the Crepeline is stitched in place at its edges with running stitches. The stitches are 1 to 2 mm long on the face side and about 5 mm long on the reverse. The stitches are made through the Crepeline and the sample, but not into the lining. On average, it took 56 minutes to conserve a surrogate like this. If Crepeline is used over a larger area, running stitches are sewn in rows over the whole area to keep the Crepeline close to the fabric it is protecting. But in this case, it isn't necessary as the area is so small. The aim of this study is to evaluate different conservation methods to investigate their effect on aged and damaged silk. After conservation, the surrogates were tensile tested. As a costume is subjected to handling during photographing and mounting prior to exhibitions, this handling was simulated by accelerated wear on some of the surrogates, and the surrogates were then tensile tested. Another set of surrogates had their conservation treatments removed after accelerated wear to investigate how the conservation method had influenced the fragile silk. The surrogates were tested with a standard method that measures maximum force required to rupture the fabrics. In this case, the increase of the strength due to the different conservation methods was measured, and the effect of the different methods was compared.